Welcome back to my 12 Days of Christmas. This is day 5 and today's show is Doctor Who. I've been excited to record this one, also kind of nervous for it because when it comes to the Doctor Who fandoms, I think they're probably online anyway, they are one of the worst. Very opinionated, my opinion is fact, actually you're wrong, which doesn't then provide many good interactions with people online concerning Doctor Who unless you find some nice people and kind of cling on to them forever. But yeah, for this video, I'm going to be ranking, on my personal opinion, my personal ranking of all the 13th Doctor stories so far. Obviously it's played by Jodie Whittaker. And this is very changeable. Even as I was kind of putting a list together and getting all the things ready for this video, I was like swapping them around and stuff. So this is just in the moment for now. This is where I'm at. And they can easily change because I think some of these stories were very close in terms of where I'm going to rank them. But yeah, we're kind of going through it. There's going to be 19 entries in all, because I've included that 2-parters I put together. So yeah, I'm nervous because I know for a fact I have some very, very unpopular opinions about some of these stories in this era, but it's nothing you may not have been surprised about coming up if you've watched mine and Colin's reactions to them on my channel. Be kind, just remember it's my opinion, you're entitled to yours still, I'm entitled to mine, we don't need to fight about it, I don't need to be told I'm wrong, because it's my opinion. And if you're going to come on here, there's probably a few people who are going to find this. If you're going to come on here with your rest in peace Doctor Who, or your hashtag not my doctor, or your racist or sexist bullshit, don't bother, you'll be deleted and blocked from the channel. Just go to another dark corner of the internet. Critique the show by all means, fine. If this era isn't for you, you know, fair enough. Not every era is for everyone, you know. There's some episodes I remember really loving when they first aired, like when the show came back and stuff. Now I'm like, oh yeah, this isn't as good as I remember. Your tastes change, that's kind of how it works. And that's why I like doing follow-up videos like these, because just because my opinions and stuff in those reactions were what I said, and that's how I felt at the time, things can change. You know, what you say in a reaction isn't set in stone forever about your opinion. That's why I was kind of excited to do this video, to, you know, lay it all out there, how I feel about this era so far, leading up to the New Year's Day special coming up, Revolution of the Daleks, which I'm very hyped for. But for now, let's get into this ranking. So, 19th place and bottom of the list is Orphan 55, which I can't say without just smiling and laughing, which is obviously Season 12, or Series 12, Episode 3. It is, I think I can think of it fondly for the memes that have come from it. You know, the whole Benny thing is iconic and made me laugh so much when I was watching the episode, and I do get enjoyment out of that, all the memes that come from it. And yeah, the dregs I think are really cool, like design wise, and I like that, and like that's what humanity could become, things like that. And it's just, I think there's a lot thrown in there, a lot of unnecessary characters that we just don't need or care about, and I think that really kind of bogs it down. Some very strange story choices with the whole, you know, oh, you're actually my mother and I hate you, blah blah blah, like all that long lost EastEnders stuff that I don't think needed to be in there. Some really kind of bizarre choices with that. Costuming at times wasn't the best either. I don't mind the twist that it was actually Earth all along. And I don't actually mind the whole pollution speech at the end of the episode that so many people have an issue with. And I get it, you know, it is kind of a bit, you know, preachy, down your throat kind of thing. I don't mind it because I feel like it's an important issue. Need to address it. Plus, it's not like the first time Doctor Who's ever done that. If you've watched The Green Death, the John Pertwee story, it's literally, you know, multiple episodes about pollution and all that jazz. Doctor Who's broken the fourth wall in terms of that before. We actually had an episode with William Hartnell where he turns to the camera and wishes you Merry Christmas. But again, it's different things. You may not have seen all those episodes, and that, you know, how much of other Doctor Who I guess you've seen would influence your opinions on stuff like this. And a lot of people may have come into Doctor Who for the first time with this era because, you know, it's a female Doctor. Maybe people want to check it out and they've stuck with it since then, and they weren't interested until there was a female Doctor. So it's a very tough job, I think, for Doctor Who to remain consistently interesting and having to keep refreshing every few years and stuff like that. It's a very interesting show like that. People can dip in and out of it throughout their lives, and yet it still can always like cater to them, which I think's what's so incredibly unique and special about Doctor Who, I think, and why it's so loved by a lot of people and why it's endured so long. But Orphan 55, the characters, I think, the side characters in particular, are just underwritten, really drag it down. Some decent stuff in there, you know, it looks cool and everything, but there was just too much put in, and too much of what was put in was really unnecessary and kind of dragged things down a bit. So Orphan 55, I don't think that's really a surprise to many people. I think a lot of people would rank this as one of their lowest ones. I don't think it's the worst episode of Doctor Who ever, by a long shot, I really don't. But for me, it is the worst episode of Jodie's era so far. Number 18 on this list is Praxeus, which is season 12, or series 12, episode 6, I think. On the fly there, I'm pretty sure it's episode 6. But yeah, either way, it's the kind of don't leave your rubbish around, don't pollute the ocean kind of thing. Another kind of, you know, issue-based episode in a sense. I don't think this was as in your face as Orphan 55 was, but everything surrounding it, when I first watched it, I was like, yeah, it's fine, you know, it is what it is, I don't mind it. I didn't particularly love it, I didn't particularly hate it. It has, I think, gone down in my estimation since I've thought about it more and rewatched a few bits of it. I'm like, you know, it's just, they could have done more with it, I think. It doesn't help, certainly, that it comes straight after Fugitive of the Jadoon and all those kind of big revolutions. That certainly doesn't help. But again, some side characters are completely forgotten about. Some really drag it down. The influencer girl, oh my god. And yeah, it's just, I feel like they could have done a bit more with the concept. I love the idea of like the gang being split up a bit or doing their own separate missions. You know, some of the ideas there are really cool. The look of the infection and everything was really cool. But I also think it was a missed opportunity to have this be like a Sea Devils story and bring them back from the classic series. It's kind of the perfect way of doing it. So I guess that's kind of why I wasn't as fond of it either, because of that disappointment. It's a shame. I feel like they really could have done with that. Maybe they thought about it, who knows. But yeah, again, a lot of focus on these other characters, and they're not particularly well written characters at times. And it's just kind of a standard affair. I think, you know, the main cast are good and everything, and I do like them being split up. And then the two husbands, their story I thought was actually very well done through it. I think they kind of carry the episode through with what they were doing with them. But then we have like flying the TARDIS around, flying the Cure over the planet or something. That kind of ending felt a bit like, I don't know, that's maybe a bit easy. One of those things where the stakes are all there and then they're quickly removed. I don't know. There's some really great imagery in it, you know, the location work and everything's really good, but in terms of just the story behind it, I think it was just kind of meh right from the off, and there's only so far you can go to make that more entertaining and improve it. So yeah, Praxis is just kind of so beyond average for me that you kind of forget about it almost after you've stopped watching it, which I don't think Doctor Who really should do that, you know? When a show where you can literally do anything like Doctor Who, the fact that you can still make episodes that just, that was kind of dull, a bit boring, a bit slow, is kind of, you know, things have gone horribly wrong. And Praxis is kind of an example of that, I would say. So 17 on this list is The Ghost Monument, which is Series 11, Episode 2. Again, the location work and everything with this episode, it looks fantastic. It's so well done in that aspect. But it feels like nothing happens for so long. I love the idea of them being on this other planet and it's their first adventure. It's just those weird rag things, like, why could you not have gone for something a bit different than like floating rags? Like, I feel like this could have been a more interesting thing there. And then these apparently super elite sniper robots that are actually rubbish shots for some reason. There's a bit of humour, I guess, in Ryan, like, getting a gun. Oh, I play Call of Duty, I know what to do, and it going horribly wrong for him. There's a bit of humour in that, but I can also see why people would find that a bit too silly. I go back and forth on that. But again, it just feels like, oh, here's some setup for a really interesting race, and this planet is so deadly and dangerous, but they never actually show us really a lot of why it's dangerous. You know, they could have introduced another person in the race and they get quickly killed off, just to like elevate the threat a bit, but we don't even see it. Like, there's like acid water or something, there's fish in the water or something that will kill you. They never show that, so I'm like, oh, okay, well that's just a shot of some water, like that's not particularly impressive. I can go and turn on my tap. There's some water. Ooh. So it was more, they tell us so much and give us so much exposition but never really show it. And I think that would have improved the story greatly and make it feel like things are actually moving along. But instead we just get these random scenes where their journey just stops so they can have this conversation about this guy's backstory, about his mum letting him fall off a tree. I'm like, do we need this? No, we don't, is the answer. It's just another kind of long, plodding thing that takes ages to get going. But I do love the ending sequence when the TARDIS finally appears and we get a look at the interior and everything, and you can see the crew kind of properly forming. And the idea of like the space race and everything was really cool. I just don't think they did enough with it writing wise. It was just kind of it was too overwritten, I would say, and they didn't show us enough of what would have made this a really cool episode. Number 16 on this list is Arachnids in the UK, which is Series 11, Episode 4, and I'm going to try and talk about this one very quickly so I can get that god-awful picture off this screen, because my god, I got really uncomfortable kind of searching for it. Like, this episode, if you remember my reaction to this, I was like, that giant bloody spider crawling out the bathtub, no. I'm not even, like, arachnophobic, really. Just something about spiders. But classic, like, oh, let's have a giant spider episode. Why not? And overall, I think it was a decent enough time. I don't like all the spiders getting distracted by Stormzy music or whatever it was. I thought that was a bit stupid. And, you know, even for Doctor Who, the suspension of disbelief as to how the spiders were kind of made big and stuff, you can kind of get past it. But it didn't feel like a complete resolution to it either, because, you know, that really big spider died, of course. But there was like a spider in Graham's attic or something, so there were clearly still spiders out and about, and like they didn't round those up, they just, you know, they just locked all that group of them in a room. But there's probably still more roaming about Sheffield if there's one in Graham's attic somehow. So, you know, in terms of a plot, it's kind of bog standard in that sense, and the resolution to it, again, I wasn't that big on. The kind of Trump allegory guy, I think, was a bit too overdone, a bit on the nose, so I wasn't big on that either. But I loved what they did with Graham and his visions of Grace, kind of dealing with grief, the fact that him and Ryan were coming back home for the first time since Grace died. Really liked everything they did with that. You know, the Doctor had a lot of really funny moments, insulting Yaz's dad about his curry or something, and, you know, clearly not wanting to say goodbye to these friends she's just made. I really liked everything with that, and their ultimate decision to, you know, say, can we stay? And they became a proper TARDIS team. Loved everything with that. Character-wise, like the main cast, I think they did do some good stuff here. But again, some of the side characters I think were more, they were just the allegory, or the stereotype more than an actual interesting character. But the giant spiders were creepy. I was creeped out by them for sure. Some cool visuals they got from them as well. And yeah, it's just kind of, it's a fun little episode in itself, but it's not one I'd ever absolutely rush to rewatch at any point. Number 15 on this list is the Battle of Ranskor Av Kolos, which is Series 11, Episode 10, the Series 11 finale. This is an odd one to place. I nearly did place this lower, but I do like some elements in it, and I think as an episode, it's fine. As a finale, I think it really isn't the best episode. Tim Shaw coming back, that kind of full circle thing with him, I liked everything with that. I think the actors are great who plays Tim Shaw, so the confrontations and everything going on there was really cool. I also love the idea of these people who could like manipulate rocks and stuff. These kind of really powerful beings being manipulated by Tim Shaw, believing him to be this god. That idea was really fun as well. I wish they kind of did more with it. And the arc of Graham and Ryan, you know, should they get revenge on Tim Shaw for what happened to Grace, and ultimately kind of getting their own back on him for that, locking him away. Again, maybe a bit too easy of a solution to stopping him in that sense, but Tim Shaw was a lot weaker in this story. You know, his health and stuff was in huge decline after the events of Woman Who Fell to Earth, so it kind of makes sense they could get one over on him. Calling it something like the Battle of Ranskor Av Kolos and promising this big kind of massive scale war and everything, again, they just over-explain it. They talk too much over it. We don't actually get like a real battle or anything per se. Tim Shaw's plan of, you know, taking all these planets and stuff, we kind of see it in a sense, but we don't see it, all these events leading up to it and happening, and you just don't feel the threat, I think. They don't execute that well enough, I think, in this, so the tension isn't quite there. But some aspects of it, like I said, I did enjoy, and I like that they kind of did circle back to the Tim Shaw thing. We kind of all assumed he was going to show up again in the finale, and he did. So in that sense, it was a nice way of resolving, is that a word? I don't know. Resolving that arc. That was kind of started way back in episode 1. And I like the Doctor's speech at the end about travelling hopefully, the universe may surprise you. That was all well done. And yeah, it's a solid episode for me. Sometimes it was a bit long. I like Mark Addy in it. I think he's a good guest star, but again, somewhat wasted, I think, by his role. But as a finale and an end to a season, I think overall it was a bit underwhelming and a bit slow. Sometimes, you know, you kind of lose interest in it, so that's kind of why it definitely ranked a bit lower down. Number 14 on the list is the Saranga Conundrum, which is Series 11, Episode 5. This is another interesting one. I think this one really does divide opinion. You either love it or hate it for the most part. I've seen a lot of people say, oh, this is the worst episode of Doctor Who ever. I've seen some people who really enjoy this one. I definitely lean more toward the side of liking it. The idea of them being stuck on this space station and this creature kind of can eat anything and stuff, like how do you stop that? Everything with that I thought was really well done. I liked a lot of the arcs with the side characters for the most part. Again, maybe a bit too many, but I liked what they were doing with like the pregnant guy, and Ryan could relate that to his dad not really being around. And we did get some few odd instances where the plot just like stops so Ryan and Yaz can talk about Ryan's dad, and I feel like that wasn't very organically put into the episode. But a good guest cast. I like, you know, the Doctor trying to demand that they turn the ship around quite early on, and then she realises she's made a mistake and apologises for it, so it's a bit of development for that. The Pating, I think, is a really intriguing idea. Maybe they could have found a more menacing design for it. I know a lot of people probably would have preferred the episode for that, but I think at the end of the day, they want to sell toys and plushies, so they made it cute. And also, I think it's an interesting contrast. Maybe if it had, the more it ate, the more it kind of became more gross and evil looking. I think that could have been a neat idea. But again, they'd have to make new character models and everything for it, and budget. So, yeah, I personally don't mind how the Pating looks. I think it's an interesting contrast to what it's capable of, and the fact it's this tiny little thing, and suddenly its mouth goes, rah, and it can just eat any material, so it got rid of the Sonic for a bit. That was a cool way of kind of raising the stakes. And then Yaz, like, yeeting it across the hall was hilarious, and it getting sent out into space looking all happy at the end. Yeah, I feel like maybe they didn't do quite enough to... Again, they just tell us that, oh, the Pating's in the corridors, the Pating's over here, the Pating's over there, the Pating's eating the ship, but we don't see it enough. That's, I think, a big issue, particularly with Series 11, I think, had that issue. They over-explained things, they gave us too much exposition, and they told us, and they didn't show us. But overall, I think it's a neat little episode. Yeah, the pregnant guy, I liked his subplot. The brother and sister subplot and the android, I didn't mind that. I thought that was pretty solid. And the main cast were good as always. I personally liked the idea of the Pating, so I think it's kind of cool. And yeah, I like the classic kind of Doctor Who formula where they're like trapped in a ship or under, you know, in a base somewhere with this monster. How do we get out of it? And I think they did something a bit different with the monster this time by making it cute, but also making it, you know, be able to eat any kind of material, which I thought was a neat little idea. And yeah, I don't mind the episode at all. I'm definitely kind of leaning to more like these episodes are kind of above average for me now, for sure. With this one, this kind of really, where it really starts on this list. So I'm a fan of this episode. I think it's good. Okay, now this is where it's going to get a bit controversial. This is where I'm going to get a bit of hate, I think. This is the one I'm most nervous about in my ranking. So yeah, number 13 on the list is Fugitive of the Jadoo. Now, hear me out. The Timeless Child, that episode, you know, the series finale, it did win me over on the whole idea of like this other Doctor and stuff. I really don't mind about that at all now. Captain Jack coming back was really great as well. Seeing the Jadoon again was always cool. But I don't think, you know, these big surprises, these big twists, these familiar faces coming back, I don't think that necessarily should make an episode good. Oh, like, did you see that twist at the end? I didn't see it coming. That was so good. What an amazing episode. But I'm like, well, yeah, but there is like 40 minutes of episode before the big twists. And yeah, I think some people do remember that. 'Cause, you know, like Vincent the Doctor, I love that episode, but if it didn't have the ending scene, it would just be like, yeah, it's alright. And I feel like that's the case with Fugitive to Jadoon. And a lot of people just focus on, Jack's back, this is the best episode, 10 out of 10. When, you know, he doesn't actually add to the plot in any way, you know. It did kind of feel quite fanservice-y. In that sense, I'm sure they're going to kind of address that and fix that, because we're going to be seeing him again. But in this one episode, you know, did he need to be there? No. But, yeah, it's still nice to see him. And then the Ruth Doctor thing, again, crazy twist. But even at the end of the series, we still don't know exactly where she fits. And, like, if she's before Hartnell, how does she have the, you know, the police box TARDIS? So they do this really cool setup and then never actually explain it. And we don't properly see Ruth again after Fugitive of the Jadoon. You know, it's in the Doctor's mind that she sees Ruth in the Timeless Children. So I think its placement halfway through this season was an odd one. I think it should have come a bit later, because then they kind of just, why should we care so much about all these shocking revelations about the Doctor, and she clearly doesn't know a lot about her own history, when straight after she gets all these revelations, she's like, nah, let's just travel for a bit, let's go and do the Praxius thing, let's go and have a bit of a boring episode. So why should we care about it? And I'm still not, like, I don't like how Ruth Doctor treated the 13th Doctor either. I thought, you know, she's very rude and stuff. I get that's kind of her personality and everything. Much preferred her in the Timeless Children. But I think as an episode, and that it's very jarring when it has that twist. And I just think the structure of it is a bit all over the place, and it's a very kind of sloppy episode for me. I just think, you know, yes, there's some great twists in it. Yes, it's fantastic to see Captain Jack back, but there is an actual episode here, and I think the structure of it wasn't brilliant. I just think it feels very jarring and sloppy. Even when I know what's coming and I rewatch it, I still feel like, I don't know, I feel like they set up a lot of stuff, and you think, this is going to be really, really cool. But when you look at what they do with it for the rest of the series, they don't actually explain a great ton of it. Like the whole, you know, what was Ruth the Fugitive for? Maybe they'll explain that, I imagine, in Revolution of the Daleks. You know, how is she linked to that other woman from Gallifrey? Exactly, where does it all fit in? They don't actually explain any of this setup, so it kind of, you look back at it and like, oh, well, I guess we'll never know. Obviously, they still have time to explain it, but they probably should have given us all these answers to these questions within the same series. So I just think it's a very kind of all over the place episode with some great twists in it. But, you know, a good twist doth not a good episode make, if you ask me. So I'm sorry that people are going to come at me for that, because I know a lot of people will put this as number one for their ranking of Jodie's era. But for me, I just think it's, you know, a bit of a jarring episode, and it doesn't quite flow in a decent way. Number 12 on this list is Kablam, which is Series 11, Episode 7. Again, this is another one I think a lot of people really love and would rank a lot higher. For me, you know, it's a good episode. I wouldn't call it like one of the all-time greats. I wouldn't even call it, you know, one of the greats of Series 11, personally. But it was a good one. You know, the idea of like the explosive bubble wrap's cool. I love the design of the robots and the setup, you know, the ties to, you know, speaking about Amazon and all those kind of companies. I love the twist with Charlie being the villain. I wasn't really expecting that, and you know, the girl he liked dying. So there was some stakes there. Lee Mack getting turned into goo or something like that. So yeah, there is some fun moments in there. I love the kind of Toy Story 2-esque scene where Yaz, Ryan and Charlie are like trapped and like going down all these escalators and all over the place. So some good action in there as well. I feel like this was one of the better episodes of Series 11. They probably showed us a lot more than just, you know, telling us, which was the fault of a lot of Series 11 episodes. I think, you know, they balanced it very well with this one. Yeah, everything about the setting I thought was really nice, very well done. The mystery behind it, you know, I was constantly engaged with it. And yeah, from an aesthetic level, I think they had some really cool iconography in this one. But again, maybe some underused, underdeveloped side characters, like Lee Mack's character. You know, he says a couple of words with Yaz, a few conversations, then she's like, we simply have to find his daughter and give her this, and, you know, again, they didn't actually show us. That could have been a really nice emotional scene if we'd actually seen Yaz give the little girl, you know, her dad's like necklace or whatever it was. But instead, they're like, oh yeah, we'll go and do that off screen. Okay, right. So the emotional impact of killing off Lee Mack, we don't even get to see it. Bit strange, but you know, it is what it is. But overall, I do think it's one of the better episodes of Series 11. And it's a fun ride, for sure. So number 11 on this list is Spyfall Part 1 and 2. Obviously the first 2 episodes of Series 12, the opening 2-parter. Again, I feel like I have some unpopular opinions about this. I know most people prefer Part 2 to Part 1. I vastly prefer Part 1 to Part 2. You know, the James Bond element, I'm glad they didn't carry it over onto the second part. I think that would have been a bit overkill, but I like what they were kind of doing with it, seeing everyone get dressed up in tuxedos. I love the master reveal at the end of the episode. It completely took me by surprise. Loved everything with that. The cliffhanger was really good. And seeing all these different gadgets, everything with Part 1, I thought it was a really great return. You could really tell, I think, kind of been given a bit of a kick up the arse to try and make it more action-packed and interesting and engaging. And I think they certainly did that. We had some really good action sequences. I loved the imagery of the creatures in there. I wish, again, overall for the story, I wish they'd done more with them and Lenny Henry's character, but I loved the kind of imagery there behind it. Provided some really great moments as well, and they were kind of stalking the house. But I think, you know, with Spyfall Part 1, it has that great twist at the end and a great cliffhanger, but there's also a pretty decent episode leading up to that as well, kind of reintroducing us to everyone and the family and everything. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. But for me, what drags the story down a bit is Part 2. It felt a bit long for me, Part 2, and I feel like they put too much in it. We have this groundbreaking master reveal. He's back. You know, how does he fit in? Again, we don't even know where that incarnation of the master fits in. They just seem like they don't want to explain anything in Series 12, whereas they over-explained in Series 11. So hopefully Series 13 has a good balance of both. Because it comes to a point where it's like, well, we're going to leave it up to the audience's imagination. Fine, fair enough. But if you do that for literally every single mystery you set up, which I think they basically have in Series 12, it gets to a point where it's like, do you even know? Do you just have this nice idea, but you don't know how it's going to fit in, so you're just going to leave it to the audience to make it up? So I'm not sure that's how you should really structure and run your show. But I don't know how it works behind the scenes. Maybe they have some great answers in store. I know Chibnall has like a multi-year plan, so maybe, you know, we just need to wait and see, and I can eat my words. And I'm happy to eat my words if I'm wrong. But at this point in time, it still feels a bit like, but yeah, they had all that going on, and then they also have the companions on the run and having to solve that cliffhanger at the end as well. And then we had the Doctor and Master throughout time. I like everything with that, but they also, on top of that story, they put in some more historical figures and kind of try and tie that into things. And I get where they're kind of coming from with like certain ones, like I think it was Ada Lovelace, because they kind of revisit like a relative of hers or something, I think, or a friend of hers later on, I think in Haunting of Villa Diodati, I think. So I can see where the set's coming from with that, but they just, too many characters for like the second part of the story. So Lenny Henry's character also gets a bit lost, and they have to rush that whole resolution with him. And even the cliffhanger, resolving the cliffhanger is kind of an afterthought, because the Doctor's like, oh, I need to solve this at the very end of the episode. So yeah, there's stuff with that, and then we get a very cool reveal again at the end of the episode. Gallifrey's been destroyed again. You know, does that undo everything all over again? Yes, I don't really mind that. You know, every showrunner's going to want to put their stamp on it. They're going to undo things, you know. There's only so long the Time Lords could have stayed away from the show forever when the show came back and killing them all off, because that's the potential for so many great Gallifrey stories completely gone. Then they get brought back, and then they don't really do much with them, and then they get killed off again, so we'll have to see what happens. But I really don't mind it when the showrunner just kind of retcons what previous showrunners have done, because that's kind of Doctor Who's canon, that's what happens. And even with the whole Timeless Children thing, give it 5 years, that'll be retconned, so, you know, let's not get too pressed about it. But yeah, the reveal that the Master's like killed all the Time Lords, you know, great. How did he manage that? You know, what, did he use a big weapon? Did he just go around shooting them all with a pistol? We never really get that explained, but Gallifrey's completely in ruins when the Doctor checks. How? How did he accomplish this? We never know. So yeah, I guess we're leaving it to our imaginations again, folks. But I love the kind of dynamic between the Doctor and the Master. I love Sacha Dhawan's Master so much. I think he could easily be my favourite new series Master. And yeah, I loved everything with that dynamic, and they continue to explore it obviously later on in the series. But I think there's just a bit too much kind of historical plodding, I guess, in part 2, and they just try and shove in too many historical characters and stuff. Like, I just think you lose the sense of where the story's going. Like those creatures from part 1, you know, they kind of don't get the screen time they probably should have deserved in part 2, and so much gets a bit muddled, and I just think the setup was a lot better than the resolution to it in the second half, which is why that kind of drags the story down for me. So into the top 10, and at number 10 it's Resolution, which is obviously the Series 11 New Year's Day special. I really enjoyed this episode. Again, some parts of it I think are quite slow. The kind of subplot with Ryan and his dad, some points it works, some points it doesn't. I think the scene in the cafe with the two of them kills the pacing. I think that's a bit too long. You know, him just so happening to bring the microwave in that helps defeat the Dalek isn't like the best writing in the world, I would say. And oh my god, Ryan's dad's going to sacrifice himself. It's going to be really emotional, really cool way of oh no, oh he's fine, the episode's over, okay. You know, I think they just don't go there enough with it at times. I don't mind the whole like unit being shut down because of Brexit kind of gag. Unit will be back eventually, and has it really been used all that much in the new series anyway? No. But we've got the return of the Daleks, seeing if 13 kind of face off with the Dalek was really fun. I liked the kind of one-off-ish kind of design of it building itself. I really liked the kind of scientist couple and their kind of romance. I really liked them as supporting characters. I thought they were really good. I was very invested in their story, so I liked everything going on with that. I thought they gave good performances. The idea of like this Dalek mutant, it's like a more advanced one, being able to like take over a host and control the body. I liked everything with that. Seeing the Dalek just absolutely go to town on the army, kill all these people, that was really good. It was nice to get, you know, see the Daleks really be threatening again in that sense. So I think this was the best Dalek story in quite some time. Hopefully Revolution of the Daleks will continue that with another great story. So yeah, it was cool kind of getting that big showdown, but there were a few things that kind of slowed the pacing down. And I think the idea of this mutant being cut up into little pieces, scattered across the world, and then, you know, UV light reawakening one part of it, somehow bringing it back to life, then all the other pieces teleport away and it forms again. I thought that was really stupid. Like, how did it survive being cut into little pieces, spread across the earth, and why does a bit of UV light bring it back and magically make the rest of it teleport to it and reform? Like, I thought that was, again, not very good writing in terms of how the Dalek was brought back, but when the Dalek was back and reformed, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good threat. Liked seeing the 13th Doctor kind of square off against them. So overall, it's a really good episode. I like Resolution a hell of a lot. I think we're kind of into the really great episodes kind of territory for me now. So yeah, really enjoyed Resolution. I thought it was a really great story. So at number 9, it's Demons of the Punjab, which is Series 11, Episode 6. One thing I do have to say for Jodie's era, that I think they really excel in more than any other era in the new series, is the historicals. I've adored like every single historical story in the 13th Doctor era so far. I don't know how they're approaching differently and stuff, but I just think it really works. They do some really like proper emotional, impactful issues they focus on, very impactful stories there, and yeah, they just create amazing episodes. And considering, you know, since the show came back, I'm like, okay, yeah, there's been the odd historical story I've really enjoyed. I love The Unquiet Dead. I think the Shakespeare Code is pretty fun. But for the most part, when you see like a Next Time, and always a historical story, I'm kind of like, yeah, okay, I guess I'll sit through that and wait for an episode I'm more excited about to come along. But this era, when I've been like, next time, a historical episode, I'm like, oh yes, I'm really excited to see what they do with this. So that's kind of testament to this era, and something I think they do fantastically well. Demons of the Punjab is a great example of that. Those creatures, the idea behind them, the twist with them, I love. They look fantastic. I hope we kind of see more of them. Maybe see the more evil group of them, like earlier in their timeline before they kind of become better and good people, or good aliens, I guess. Some great imagery with them, like that ending scene where they have all the faces, the dead people that they're watching over. I think that's really emotional. The score and the music, you know, Sega Nakanoda's music has been phenomenal in this era, and it really does shine in this episode in particular. Focusing on the partition of India and that kind of, you know, the doomed wedding between Yaz's grandmother and, you know, the husband that ends up dying, you know, his brother kills him. Everything with that I thought was really powerful, really impactful, and just a fantastic emotional story. And it gave a bit of meat and bones, I guess, to Yaz's character and her family. Again, it wasn't necessarily about Yaz in the way it probably should have been, in the way Arachnids I think also should have been, but nonetheless they told a really emotional, powerful story, and I love the idea behind the creatures in it. They weren't necessarily evil, it was just, you know, the goddamn humans being the villains again, which I think this story did very, very well. Like, the humans are the real monsters. So yeah, I adore this episode. Number 8 on the list is Ascension of the Cybermen and the Timeless Children, which is obviously the Series 12 finale. I love the Cybermen, they're my favourite villains. It was great to see them, I love their redesign. Not so a big fan that once again the finale kind of put them aside in the background and made it all about the Master, but I also like Sacha Dhawan's Master, so it's kind of a, you know, 50-50 kind of thing there. But yeah, I did enjoy seeing the Cybermen, you know, have this big presence. Ashad as like the lone Cyberman was really cool. Love seeing the Cybermen and the Cyber Wars, like killing people, everything with that was really fun. And the cliffhanger with the Master coming through, and everything with the Timeless Children, adding to that lore, making the Doctor kind of mysterious. I really don't mind the adding of all these extra Doctors, you know, it is what it is. I get why people may not like it. I don't like the idea of it when I first kind of considered it and heard about it, but I think the episode won me round. But again, the structure of it and the writing maybe could have been a bit better, because it was just like, for like half an hour, the Doctor sits down and has story time with the Master as he kind of reveals all this backstory, and it's not like very organically told to us. It literally is just the Master like reading from a storybook. But it's some interesting lore and backstory, and again, it'll probably be retconned in the next show when it comes along anyway. It is what it is. But for now, it's kind of a really interesting addition to the lore of the show. The Cyber Masters, interesting idea. I think the design, maybe the things on the site, I think they look a bit ridiculous with those, but I like the idea behind it, and of course they're going to come back with the Master at some point for sure. They can never truly stay dead, but interesting designs. I like that being the Master's like final plan, how him and Ashad were working together, ultimately got manipulated. I don't think they needed the Brendan stuff in part 1. They could have easily cut that, because the Doctor's like, oh yeah, I've been having visions of these things, and like, you never once did you hint in part 1 that those Brendan flashbacks were actually something that the Doctor was seeing and having visions of. They didn't even remotely kind of link those two things together. But it was an interesting way of covering up the truth about the Timeless Child and everything, the cover of that, but I really think you could have cut them, so that kind of slowed the things down a bit. And then the very end, the companions are back on Earth, the Doctor's been like taken by the Jadoon, bit of a cliffhanger there, so I'm excited to see what they do with that. And I do enjoy the rivalry with the Doctor and the Master, the Doctor kind of breaking out of her prison by overloading it with all these thoughts. So an interesting addition to the lore, whether you like it or not, is obviously going to depend on how you see the story overall. And I would have loved more proper Cybermen action and actual focus on them as the main villains. Hopefully we'll get that again at some point, because we really haven't had that in a while. But yeah, overall I think it was a really fun finale. I enjoy watching it back, and it's brave, I think, to do the things they did with the lore. And yeah, I think it was a really great ending to a much improved Series 12, I would say. Number 7 on this list is The Witchfinders, which is Series 11, Episode 8. I unapologetically adore this episode. I think it's so much fun. A lot of it, of course, comes down to Alan Cumming's performance as King James I. He is hilarious, so watchable, carries the episode for me. I hope he comes back at some point, because my god, he was having an absolute blast playing that character, and therefore, as an audience member, I had an absolute blast watching it. You know, the villains weren't the best. How they were defeated was a bit simple again, not perfect, but I liked the focus on this whole mystery behind this actual real life town, and then what happened with everything. The witch trials, you know, this story worked infinitely better because the Doctor's now a female, so she could also go through the trials and everything. Liked everything with that. It was just a really fun, very watchable episode for me. There's some nice character interactions with everyone, and King James was just so fun to watch. I adored it. I love the scene with him and the Doctor when she's tied up and they're kind of talking about each other. Everything that was really great fun. And it was just nice at that point in series 11 to just have like a proper evil monster that wanted to take over. Because we hadn't really properly had like monsters and villains, I think, at that point in the standard like good old Doctor Who monster way. So it was nice to kind of get an old-fashioned monster, even if it wasn't the best. I do think the makeup on it and everything was pretty cool and interesting. So it was another really fun historical story that I just find one of the most rewatchable episodes of Jodie's era so far for me. I just really, really adore it. Number 6 on the list is The Haunting of Villa Diodati, which is Series 12, Episode 8. I almost included this with, you know, Ascension, the Cybermen and the Timeless Children, because it is a kind of a big lead into that, but I ultimately just decided to make it its own thing, because until like the halfway point it is. Loved all the guest cast. I thought they all did a really good job. They all had a decent amount to do. I think that the balance of the characters, considering how many there were, was done very well. Some really like scary imagery and everything, with like some apparent ghosts. Liked everything with that, and I really like how it was explained how those things happened. It was like that guy in the basement, kind of doing all those things, trying to get attention and everything. I thought that was really clever. I love that reveal, like, explaining everything. And the one thing it didn't explain, it was like, oh, maybe ghosts are real, because those, like, that mother and daughter, whatever it was that Graham saw, didn't get explained. But on that occasion, I don't mind that we weren't expressly told about it, because sure, ghosts are real, why in the hell not? And then we get the big turn, oh, it's the lone Cyberman is actually the big threat in this story, and it becomes like sort of a Cyberman horror story then, and how that ties into Mary Shelley and Frankenstein and everything with that. I feel like that midway point for the episode twists works infinitely better and isn't as jarring as the Fugitive of the Jejune thing, so I think the episode still flows a lot better for that. So yeah, liked everything with that. Loved the lone Cyberman as a villain. The design of him's really cool. The sequence where the baby's crying, and that woman's kind of hiding with it, and he just like, she screams and he just kills her like nothing, and he doesn't kill the baby because he knows that baby's going to die later on anyway. Like, damn, brutal as hell. Loved everything with that. Just a really creepy, atmospheric episode that made the Cybermen very scary. And then we kind of get the lead into the finale there, where the Doctor kind of gives up the thing to Ashard and off he goes. So she's like, well, I've made the mistake, now we have to go and fix it. A good lead in there, but even as a standalone story on its own, the way they tie Mary Shelley and everything into it with Frankenstein, you know, this is the night she kind of comes up with the idea for it. I thought that was really well done. Very spooky episode, really well kind of shot, very atmospheric. I think it is one of the more atmospherically successful stories of Jodie's era, if that's even a phrase. It is now. And yeah, I just really, really love kind of how they go about that. So number 5 on the list is Can You Hear Me, which is Season 12, or Series 12, Episode 7. Another controversial episode, I would say, more so based on the ending scene with Graham and the Doctor. And I can get why people may have thought that was poorly handled, or thought it reflected badly on 13 and everything. But I think because the episode was so heavily focused on mental health and everything, which is a subject matter that I'm very passionate about and very wary of and very appreciative of, the fact that they did kind of bring so much attention to it. I think that's one reason why I love the episode and appreciate it as much as I do. It's actually one of my favourites of Series 12. I think it's kind of a more realistic thing that the Doctor kind of was presented with someone worrying like that. And I think in that moment I would also have been like, oh God, how do I approach this? What do I say? And I think all you can be if someone opens up to you like that is be as honest with them as you can be, and I think that's what the Doctor did. But I can also see why people may not have felt that was the best way of going about it. They easily could have gone either way with it, but that's kind of obviously just my personal take on it. But I really loved this episode a hell of a lot. I thought the creepy god guy with the fingers coming off was bizarre, but also kind of entertaining. How they got an insight into everyone's fears. You know, it was a good look at all the characters, kind of highlighting them. I love the backstory with Yaz and kind of the mental health struggle she went through, and kind of going back to that lady like years later and giving her like 20p or whatever it was. I really liked everything with that. Again, I think that backstory came a bit too late, but I'm glad they did at least give us something. And you know, Ryan's friend that we met earlier in the season. You know, he was going through some stuff. He was encouraged to open up and talk to people about what he was going through. I just thought it was a really, really important subject matter, and I'm glad that Doctor Who kind of had an episode really about that, and about, you know, your anxieties and your fears and everything. Obviously, Graham was kind of worried about his cancer coming back, and he had that vision with Grace and stuff. I just thought it was really kind of well balanced, like dealing with the characters and their kind of emotions there. And I just like that they're helping to normalise talking about that, and regardless of the episode's quality, I would have always applauded them for that, I think, because it needs to be more, you know, mental health, I think, needs to be more spoken about and talked about and normalised in media. So I love that they did that. But even alongside that, the idea of like this god trying to free the other god, I feel like maybe they saved it until a bit too late in the episode to bring the other one in. But I did enjoy it nonetheless. In fact, I think the way they were defeated, again, a bit too easy. Why were they scared of that creature thing? You can literally like make and do anything. But still, I thought they were really creepy, like villains, particularly the guy, obviously, who kind of carried the episode for the most part as the villain. Really, really enjoyed everything with that. You know, the other stuff, like in the past, with the creatures in like the hospital kind of place, yeah, that wasn't as great. You could have easily just cut that out entirely. So I'm not saying this is the perfect episode by any means, but you know, how they kind of approached the subject matter and wrapped it around with this story with the gods and everything, I thought was really good. I like the confrontations going on with the Doctor and that guy. And yeah, it meant a lot to me that, you know, a show I love so dearly actually took some time to talk about mental health, and even such a bizarrely kind of fantasy and sci-fi world like Doctor Who, they still can ground it in reality at times, throughout these stories. You know, so many sci-fi stories can easily kind of represent and depict really important issues, and this was a great example of it for me. And that's why it just really struck a chord with me and really hit me emotionally, because yeah, it was just a subject I was very passionate about, and I liked, you know, really getting some focus on the companions and their worries and everything. I thought it was really nice. Gave a bit of, you know, just that extra layer to their characters that they didn't already have. So everything with that I thought was really well done, and I just, from a personal standpoint, really, really appreciated what this episode was trying to do, and I think that's kind of what it means quite a bit to me, really. So yeah, I'm a really big fan of this episode. And number 4 on the list is The Woman Who Fell to Earth, which is obviously Series 11, Episode 1, JB's first full episode of The Doctor, the introduction to like all the companions, and Grace, and Tim Shaw, all of that jazz, and I think it's a really, really great opener to the series. Obviously, you kind of struck right from the off, like, oh wow, this looks amazing. You know, it's a very different kind of feel to what came before. Loved everything with it. I thought Jodie was fantastic in it. I love the idea that she made her own sonic screwdriver and everything, that the TARDIS kind of was gone. So, like, it's a different kind of situation. Like, how is she going to get herself out of this one? Tim Shaw, you know, he's not, like, the best villain Doctor who's ever had, but I think he was decent enough in this episode. I love the reveal of him, like, having all the teeth on him that he takes from his victims. I thought that was very cool. And we got a decent sense of all the companions. I really liked Grace a lot, so, you know, there's a lot of emotional impact, I think, when she died. How they cycled back round to Ryan's YouTube video that kicked off the episode. Just some really, really great stuff in there, from start to finish. Again, I do think it was maybe a bit too long. Like, that subplot of the guy, like, trying to find his sister and, like, confronting Tim Shaw and stealing Tim Shaw's pod and everything. I feel like they could have trimmed that out entirely. But everything with, like, that guy, like, listening to the tapes, like, I am worth it or something, you know, I am loved, and that's, like, who Tim Shaw was after. I liked how that kind of came back, and just to see 13 try and work out who she is, take some initiative with that. I thought it was a really fun, intriguing, sometimes dark, sometimes very funny introduction to the Doctor and this kind of new set of companions. I think it was a very, very strong start to the series, and I think sometimes the rest of the series didn't necessarily live up to how the episode started off with the first one, but it's still a really great story. I love the Doctor's speech at the end, talking about how her family are all gone, and while they're gone for the world, they're never gone from her. I love that line. One of my favourite lines in Doctor Who. I thought that was just really kind of emotional, and that was like, yeah, that's the Doctor, easy. I just kind of fell in love with that incarnation right from then. So yeah, I think it's an incredibly strong first episode for the new Doctor, new companions, whole new era. Couldn't have been easy to do. You know, it hadn't really had to do something quite so much like this since the 11th hour, which I also thought was a resounding success. And yeah, just a really great start to Series 11. Another controversial one now, but number 3 for me on this list is It Takes You Away, which is Series 11, Episode 9. Yeah. You may say, let's address the elephant in the room, but I think another way of saying that is, let's address the frog on the chair. It's weird. I found it very bizarre when it first happened, and I was like, maybe they could have done something different with that. I'm okay with it now. I still think they should have and could have done something else and used someone else, make it a bit better, even if it had like the Doctor talking to herself or something, I don't know. But yeah, the frog and the puppet for it and stuff, it was a very weird idea. I don't know if that really kind of, improved the episode by any means or not. I know a lot of people thought, well, that's ridiculous, this episode's stupid, and kind of zoned off. But again, it's not just about the frog on the chair. There is a huge episode about it, and I love that it was really exploring grief and moving on from it. And the Solitract, like wanting people to desperately stay with them. It's a nice kind of contrast to all the people in the episode that were grieving and had lost people and were trying to like cling on to them. So we had, that dad who lost his wife, and Ryan and Graham still dealing with Grace's death, and Graham came face to face with the version of Grace in this one and had to kind of realise it wasn't her and let go. Obviously the Doctor's lost so many people as well, so I really like how they kind of were talking about grief and losing someone in that sense. I really liked that theme, and I thought they explored that very well. The idea of like this mirror universe, so they actually like flipped the image when they entered it, I thought that was very well done. Some really, really cool, interesting ideas. Seemingly, the blind girl, who was also, I thought, really good in this, seemingly being haunted by this monster, but it was just her dad playing some speakers and stuff outside, try and keep her at bay, but she kind of, still went off to find her mum, and straight away knew it wasn't really her mum in that other universe. So some really kind of nice emotional moments in this that, only had the impact they did because we'd seen and known Grace in episode 1, seen her die, and seen Graham and Ryan still mourn her. And then that led to the wonderful punch to the air moment where Ryan finally called Graham Grandad. And that's a really nice kind of way of ending off that episode, and showed that they're both kind of finding a bit more peace with losing Grace like that. They kind of still have a family with each other. So loved everything with that, how they kind of portrayed it. And obviously in that kind of middle-y section, like in between universes and stuff that they were going through, that had like Ribbons, that really creepy guy, and the moths that kind of ate him. I thought some really great ideas in there. And I think obviously it really could have been a clogged episode, because I know there was like another creature that they shot scenes with, in that they cut that creature out of the episode entirely, but you can find pictures of it online, like this really big tall creaturey thing. They clearly cut it for time and stuff. Maybe that would have been a bit too much, so I can see why they did it. But just how the episode explored grief, I thought was done really well. And I do like what the Doctor was saying to the Solitract, and blowing a kiss goodbye and everything, and promising to be friends forever. I thought it was a really emotional moment. I love that scene so much, like her speech to it. It's just a shame that she was giving this lovely speech to a fake frog on a chair. But it's been like 2 years since that episode now. I kind of have just gotten over it, and like, okay, it's a weird thing, but it is what it is. I still think overall the episode succeeds in what it's trying to do. But I can get if that moment did really kill it for some people. But for me, I love the episode right throughout. I think some really unique, interesting ideas. Love what they kind of did with some characters, particularly Graham and Ryan's little arc in it. And yeah, the exploration of grief I thought was done very, very well. So big fan of that episode. So number 2 on this list, it actually surprised me how well this episode did when I was kind of ranking them and rewatching a few episodes and stuff to prepare for this list. But I remember being blown away by this episode at the time. I really, really loved it, a lot more than I actually assumed I would, even though it is kind of a historical one, which I'm loving about this era. But yeah, number 2 is Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, which is Series 12, Episode 4. The guest cast, phenomenal. I love the design of the aliens, very similar to the Arachnids and everything, their whole plan, the scorpion-y kind of things. Love those creatures, just a good old proper alien again for them to fight off. They tied a few elements of the story into what the Doctor had already gone through in Spyfall, when the Queen was like, have you ever seen like a destroyed planet or something, a dead planet? And obviously the Doctor had very, very recently, so that was still kind of a scar for her. And everything like surrounding Nikola Tesla's feud with that other guy, and how smart he really was, why the aliens were kind of after him, the interactions between him and the Doctor, and they kind of got along really well. He's worried about being remembered and stuff, and the kind of tragedy behind where Tessa's life ultimately goes, but they still try to make it quite a hopeful ending, which I really appreciated. And just a really kind of fun, again, a very watchable episode. And I was looking forward to it in a sense, But I was like, in terms of like historical stories, you know, I had been more excited by some other ideas from previous historical. I was like, I was probably more excited for like the Witchfinders episode. I think that could be cool. Because I wasn't like overly familiar with Nikola Tesla or any of his story or anything. But learning about it with this one, you know, it's very educational in that sense. And a good old kind of monster to run away from as well. Some really emotional beats in there, some really funny moments. The whole cast were great. You know, the supporting cast I think is one of the strongest that this era has had. And just a really fun, engaging, entertaining episode from start to finish. I really was so impressed with it when it first aired. And even like rewatching clips and bits and pieces from it now, it's just a really fun episode and some really great performances in there as well. Just, I think this did so well and is so high up on this list just because I was like, yeah, I'm sure this will be good because historical. I'm enjoying the historicals this series, and this like so far exceeded my expectations going into an episode than I think any other episode in this era ever has. So I think that's why it kind of had to do as well as it's done. And then finally, probably not a surprise if you watch my reaction to this episode and watch me talking about Doctor Who since then and other reactions, and because a lot of people would have this episode very high up on their lists as well. Number one for me is Rosa, which is Series 11, Episode 3. Oh my god, this episode's great. I actually watched this on Christmas Day, again, with my dad and my sister last Christmas. We actually watched it because my sister hadn't seen it. So the fact that we just sat down on Christmas Day to watch an episode quite as heavy as this, I think shows the quality of it. Love what they were kind of focusing on, with like the racism at the time and how it's still about today, and maybe is it getting better, is it not, and everything about Rosa Parks, what she did, the bravery, the fact that they made an episode about her but they didn't make it like, oh, the Doctor influenced her decision to kind of refuse to like get out of her seat. It was still very much her own. Really emotional stuff with that, bringing Ryan into it, talking about it, him and Graham kind of talking like, oh, Grace would love to have met Rosa Parks, and when Ryan meets Martin Luther King, his reaction to that, really, really great. And there's still a bit of a sci-fi element in there with Krasko, space racist. I don't think you needed him in the story, but I think he was a good way of kind of moving the plot along a bit more, because maybe it would have felt a bit overly long if we didn't have him about trying to cause trouble. But I liked what they kind of did with him, the fact that he couldn't actively like just hurt people. He was kind of inhibited in that way, and he was from the Stormcage prison. His confrontations with the Doctor I really enjoyed. The fact that they just went all out on the whole racism at the time thing, they didn't really hold back. This is what it was like. That's what the episode was going for. Really powerful, important issue to discuss yet again, and I think they did it so well. And I think the impact this episode had and the critical acclaim it was met with just speaks for itself, really. The fact that, you know, they're still talking about it 2 years after it was broadcast and saying it's one of the best ones, one of the best episodes of Doctor Who ever, and new series and classic Who. I can see them like showing this episode in schools in years to come, honestly, if they talk about Rosa Parks, because we didn't learn about it at school. We didn't learn about Rosa Parks, but I feel like this episode really started something, at least, you know, here in the UK when it aired, and hopefully it will continue to do so. So it's had such a huge impact and a huge legacy. Really powerful, very moving, really emotional. You know, the scene where they all realise that they need to be part of the story and they need to be the reason why Rosa has to refuse the seat, refuse to get up, because, you know, Graham kind of becomes that man that she was supposed to stand up for. And his reaction to that's heartbreaking. Such amazing performances in this. You could really see the team starting to gel together. I thought Jodie was fantastic in this episode as well. Yeah, they just went, you know, full steam ahead on how important the issues in this story are, and they really didn't hold back on showing what it was like. And I love Ryan and Yaz's conversation about, you know, have things changed that much in present day. Just a stunning episode from start to finish. A beautiful, beautiful story about a really wonderful, amazing human being, and the strength that she showed. And yeah, it really did feel like it put Doctor Who back on the map for having such an amazing episode like this again. And I love that it wasn't just like, oh, you know, it was a really good episode of Doctor Who with a female Doctor, blah, blah. It was starting like, the series had had a few episodes to kind of get over that big, like, oh, it's very different and new. Then we had an episode about a really amazing real-life woman, the impact she's had in history. Just superbly done on all fronts, really. I absolutely adore this episode. Far and away my favourite of Jodie's run so far. Okay, so that was my ranking of the 19 individual stories of the 13th Doctor's era so far for Doctor Who. Again, just my opinion. You can agree, you can disagree, however you want. Just be respectful and kind about it. And yeah, that's kind of a really nice thing to kind of revisit all those episodes. It gets me properly prepared in the mindset for the upcoming New Year's Day special, because it's been a while since any new Doctor Who, obviously. It feels even longer ago, and the fact that we had a series this year seems nuts to me, because so much has happened in the world since then. But yeah, I'm excited to kind of get back in the Doctor Who mindset, revisit all these stories, whether I liked them or not. We've had some wonderful, wonderful stories, I think, in Jodie's era so far. I look forward to seeing what more stories there are going to be in the future with her. But for now, that is my ranking of Jodie's era. Again, a very changeable thing. You know, you could ask me again tomorrow and some of those will probably be swapped around. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. So let me know, what your rankings would be, or if, you don't have time to rank all of them, which is probably fair enough. What's your favourite? What's your top 3? What's your top 5? Anything like that. Do let me know. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. And I will see you guys tomorrow for day 6.